to Let's Talk Tuesday. This is the podcast where we have real conversations about learning, leadership, and what it truly takes to help people and organizations grow. Each week, we bring together different perspectives, experiences, and voices to explore what learning development really means, why it matters, and how we can do it better. Today, we have a very special guest, Kristal Walker from Las Vegas, who has over 20 years of experience in learning, talent, and leadership development. Welcome, Kristal.
Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm so excited you're here. Let's talk. Tell us a bit about your background and what your focus is today.
Yes, absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I have over 20 years of experience in the learning, leadership, and talent development space. 10 of those years were spent in a college classroom as a university professor, where I taught everything from freshman composition to organizational leadership, management development courses. I did that while I was actually pursuing my doctorate degree, so it was kind of fun to be able to take a lot of the theoretical context from my doctoral program and apply that in real time. That's been amazing. And then about 2014, I actually moved into the world of corporate training. I was torn between this love and passion for teaching and moving back into a full-time role that will require a lot of my time. And so I figured that if I was going to sacrifice my time for anything, it would have to be able to blend well with my desire to continue to teach and train. And so that's actually how I landed in the corporate training space. I've always been fortunate enough to work in corporate training teams and departments that reported into the human resources function, which allowed me to understand people dynamics, people analytics, uh, uh, functionality around employee engagement, talent development, organizational behavior, all of those things. So I thought that was a great opportunity to marry both, where I could learn in real time what were some of the people dynamics that I should actually be training on. So it was a beautiful combination. With that, I also had an opportunity to lean in a lot on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that that is not the most popular topic for us here in the United States, but I do believe that it's still very, very relevant. I typically would leverage the lens of cultural intelligence as we talk about DEI, because I think it absolutely matters. And so a lot of my experience really falls within that sort of three pillar triad, if you will, where I love training, I love engaging with people, and I love to make sure that I am contributing toward or being an effective contributor towards inclusive excellence.
I love that. And I love how you said cultural intelligence, so
Yes.
nonchalant, but a lot of people talk about emotional intelligence, they talk about intellectual intelligence, but cultural intelligence is not discussed as much, especially in today's environment. But what it really is, and what I explain to people is diversity has so many meanings, and it's
Oh,
also diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity. So this
yeah.
cultural intelligence, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's funny
Of
because
course.
so I've been in learning development also for a couple decades now. And I would say that when I explain to the layperson what I do, they're like, "Oh, you mean HR?" And I'm like, "Actually, no. A lot of times I'm not brought in by HR. It's usually not HR, but I, of course, have worked with HR as well. But at the end of the day, what I love about you, and we overlap here, is we're all about how do we set people up for success and how do we create inclusive environments. And I mean that in the full range of spectrum of like how people learn, how people apply it, how to engage people. So there's just so much nuance that's lost, and people get sensitive about a word or they think a word is bad. And really, I want to understand the intention. And the intention is we care about people and we want to set them up for success. It shouldn't be so
That's
complicated, right?
well, it's interesting that you say that too, in the power of word choice and wordplay. I've seen with a lot of the controversy around DEI, people swap out the word diversity for culture. And I
Mm.
think that we have to be careful not to do what we saw happening over the last couple of years, where when a lot of organizations were focused on DEI, you had a lot of DEI champions and DEI leads and DEI experts that kind of rose up overnight, but they didn't really understand the context of what it required to actually do the work.
Hmm.
So, with a lot of the swapping out of terminology, I think it's important that people do spend time understanding culture, understanding how to appropriately interpret culture, how to really leverage and tap into this application of cultural intelligence, because it is a body of work. It is resource based and research based, and there's an opportunity that if we aren't careful for us to see some of the same dynamics that we saw with the whole DEI movement, right? Because we don't have a solid understanding around culture and how to leverage it, because it can mean different things to different people. But, is there an opportunity for us to at least come to some sort of consensus as a society that it is an umbrella term that can be used to describe a way of life for a group of people who share similar interests, right? That's the magic of it. Those groups of people can range, to your point, from and represent people from all walks of life. So we just have to be careful even in this stage, because for some people, when you describe culture, they're thinking about what's happening within the walls of the company. And some
Sure.
people, when you define culture, they're thinking about, the actual lifestyles of people. And if we can't come to at least some sort of agreement around what should be centralized versus what we can decentralize in that context, and we run the same risk of, after a couple of years now, an overuse of the word culture, and people don't really understand how to leverage it, especially when it comes to like learning and development and HR work and all of the fun stuff around developing people.
Yeah, because then it becomes a fad or the it term of
Mhm.
the two years, and then it's on to the next one. So I 100% agree. And this is a perfect transition to the next question I love to ask my guests is they come from all walks of life and leadership. But that being said, how do you define learning and development?
Oh man, that's such a great question. Um, Learning and development, as you know, can happen in so many different facets. I think that's one of the reasons why you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into just thinking learning only happens through training. We know it can occur with coaching, a very informal conversation. I can learn something about anything just by having a simple conversation with someone. So I don't think there's always a formality around it. For me, learning and development has taken place in so many different facets, from general conversations, from me observing people from afar. Like, I've learned a lot of uh, uh, behaviors and traits that I aspire to grow into or become just from watching people, right? I think that action speaks way louder than words. And I know we've heard that for many, many years, but it's true. And I have learned to, rather than judging people by what they say, I tend to discern the fruit. Like, what's the evidence of the fruit that you are living out in your life? You can say that you do great things, but is that evident in your life, right? You could say you stand for something, but is that evident in your life? And I have learned a lot. I've also learned through wisdom and experience. Um, like many of us, life has a tendency to teach us a lot, and so we do learn from the school of hard knocks. I think that is really what motivated me to really want to help people, because I did learn a lot by way of trial and error. And so I feel, if I can show people the how, there's enough people telling people the what. But if I can show people the how, then that's a great contribution from my perspective of how I can help people become a better version of themselves.
Yeah, how do we expedite? How do we get them there faster? And it's again, we're very much cut from the same cloth because I and love learning and development, and yet I was never invested in by a company. Like I feel like I was always had to find out the hard way. So I want to
Yep.
give back and help them go faster and go further. But
Uh-huh.
here's what I learned. Here's the here's the tool. Here's the trick. How do we elevate you faster than it took me to figure this out on my own? Absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
why is learning and development so important, especially in today's world?
Oh man, I think it's the obvious. We're in a generation, an exciting generation where that we've never seen, but it's also very complex with the onset and evolution of AI. I continue to have conversations. In fact, I was thinking about writing an article and posting it on LinkedIn called um, uh, AI sucks, or the bad side of AI, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I think about all of the many opportunities that it has given us, as it relates to efficiency and being a thought partner with certain things. But man, it sucks that the human element continues to be sucked away from it. And, obviously, if you use it enough, you can tell when someone is being genuinely authentic in their communication or if they're just copying and pasting something from AI. Um, I think it's important that as learning and development professionals, we continue to highlight the human aspect and the relational aspect of the work that we do. It is so crucial and critical that we do so. I think about the number of spam calls, for example, that I get on a daily basis that I have to actively now block and report because you have this bot that's calling me and they can do it in a very familiar voice now that doesn't always sound robotic. And they're trying to sell me something or they want me to take a loan from this organization or you've been approved for this or that. And it's actually gotten pretty annoying.
Yeah, it's
Right.
draining.
And on the flip side of that, you have the organizations that are leveraging these bots. They're looking at, oh man, we can make this many calls, and they're looking at it as an efficiency gain, but it's actually pretty annoying, right? And so
But
I
that's
think
going
the
to
part that
backfire, you know? And
I
so
do,
one
I
of
do
the,
think so.
I do, I know.
Think
So
so.
I was on a panel years ago, and you just sub out the word technology for AI, but they
Uh-huh.
said with the technological advances, in today's world, and we're talking like 10 years ago, I was on this panel, and they said, what do you think the future is going to look like? This is pre-AI, this is pre all that, but they're like, with technology happening so rapidly and the advances coming, what do you think is the future of the industry? And for me, I said, it goes back to the basics. It goes back to human, people to people. And I feel like
That's
my
right.
answer still stands today when people ask me about AI. I said it's even more, AI is a tool to leverage for sure and make
Mhm.
it, help you go faster, help you do better, fine. But the more we saw this with technology 10 years ago, we're seeing it with AI today, the more real you can be and authentic and human to human, people crave that. You really rise above, whether it's in an organization, whether it's in
Mhm.
a team, when people actually feel that there's humans at the other end, it makes such a big difference because everything has become colder and colder and colder with communication. We talk about emotional
That's
intelligence, and
that's
it's
right.
just so critical and even more important to think about the human experience and the human element. And I feel like
Mhm.
I'm like regurgitating old lines I used to say 10 years ago, and you just sub in AI instead of technology, but it's true. It's more true today than it was even 10 years ago that people
Oh
are
yeah.
just disenfranchised by this auto world population. So,
Right. That's right. And again, I appreciate all that it's allowed us to be able to do. The ability to scale much faster than we have been in the past. The ability again to think outside of the box or to have a thought partner or to even have an additional, AI team member, if you will, right? For some of us who operate on very lean budgets and resources.
which is
But
all
man,
learning
it's so
development professionals ever.
right.
Do it faster, cheaper, better.
That's exactly right. So for me, I think that's the answer to my question is as much as we can keep the human element tied to the work that we do, uh, because we got into it. We started off this conversation around the people. It's the people dynamics. It's being able to engage with the people. And if we lose that, especially in this day and age, that's when we really need to have concerns about job security and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely. What do you wish companies knew or did differently as it relates to learning and development?
I wish companies would trust their internal L&D experts and partners. And I think this is something that I've just seen across the board as I talk to other learning and development professionals. I totally understand the need to have business acumen and to understand the language of the business as a learning and development professional. But I also feel like there should be an even exchange as it relates to how you engage with stakeholders within your organization. I feel like there should be a willing investment that they make also to understand the purpose and the business of training and how it actually works so
Mhm.
that you can come to these agreements and uh, get to the point to where you can truly see strategically aligned initiatives within the organization. I wish that in the same way that I would have the confidence in a sales rep or a sales and executive and trusting them to know their products and their service and to be able to speak the language of the business. I wish that companies would make more of an investment uh, uh, in their L&D professionals and with understanding the worlds that they live in and the work that they actually do, because it's a lot. You know, when you think about the level of investment and the magic that we're required to perform with the limited resources that we have, I feel like it ultimately attributes to burnout, right? If that professional doesn't feel like they have what they need within their role, you know, at some point, are they just going through the motions? You know, are they quiet quitting? You know, what's happening behind the scenes as a result of that constant exhaustion of trying to get the company to believe in them just as much as they believe in the company.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here, but we like to keep these short and sweet. So I'm going to ask, do you have one actionable tip or takeaway you'd love to leave the audience with today?
I think one of the things that has helped me in my career, and throughout my experience as I continue to work diligently to be a thought leader in this space, is always understanding the importance of being clear. Right? We hear all the time that clarity is kindness, right? And I think that if we, as learning and development professionals, I don't know why I can't talk this morning, but if we as learning and development professionals would be very intentional in how and what we want, and I think it will absolutely outline a clearer path for how we can get there. And excuse me, not just what we want, but why.
Right.
Right? What do you want out of your career? Why? And if you can't clearly explain that, if you don't have a clear why that's going to help you do the hard work when necessary, you'll continue to fall back in this trap. And as with any profession, if you're not clear on what you want, it's easy to begin blaming others. It's easy to start finding fault. But I have found that when I am most clear with what I want, the path that I want to take, all of the resources that I am looking for suddenly becomes available. You know, there's an old quote that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I
Mm-hmm.
think that is
Love
absolutely
that.
true.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is absolutely true. I've definitely experienced that in my own life. And so, aside from being clear on what you want, I would also add that you also need your character and your integrity to match that level. Right. So if you desire to be somewhere, man, do the work. You got to be willing to do the work, do the mental work, you know, do the character development work, because it doesn't make sense to work so hard to get to a place and then you destroy it because you don't have the right integrity to operate at that level.
You need a strong foundation to build from, 100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it. It's so true. And thank you so much for being here. This was so insightful. Loved having you on. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you, Amanda.
And with that, we'll begin to wrap up. So I hope this discussion gave our audience a few new perspectives, sparked some ideas, and left you with at least one takeaway you can put into action immediately. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and join us every Tuesday as we continue exploring learning, leadership, and what it takes to help people and organizations grow. And if today's conversation resonated with you, or if you'd like to join me for a future episode, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and let's talk again on Tuesday. Thanks, everyone.